You ever have one of those moments where your entire life just collapses? Where you're standing in a room full of people, and suddenly you realize that everything you believed about your family, your identity, your worth, it was all built on quicksand. Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me. My dad said I wasn't his daughter and cut me out of the will. So I gave him a gift that he'd regret. But let me take you back to where it all started, because you need to understand just how brutal this betrayal was. I'm Maya, and I'd always been a daddy's girl. Always. I followed my dad Robert into the family business, learned everything he taught me, shared his obsession with classic cars. We'd spend weekends at vintage car shows, just the two of us, talking about engines and dreams. I thought we had something unbreakable. I thought I was his pride and joy. So when his 60th birthday rolled around, I was genuinely excited. I'd spent weeks planning, found him a first edition of his favorite book, wrote this heartfelt speech about what he meant to me. The party was at this gorgeous upscale restaurant. All warm lighting, expensive champagne, about 50 guests including family, his business associates, close friends. The atmosphere was perfect. Everyone was laughing, reminiscing, celebrating. My younger half-brother Jake was there too, Dad's golden child from his second marriage to Diane. There'd always been this tension between us, this unspoken competition I never wanted to be part of. But tonight, I pushed that aside. This was Dad's night. The evening was going brilliantly. Speeches were made, toasts raised. Then Dad stood up for his turn, and the room went quiet. He thanked everyone for coming, got emotional talking about his life and legacy. I was smiling, proud, ready to hear him talk about family and love. Then his tone shifted. "You know," he said, his voice taking on this strange edge. "I've been thinking a lot lately about honesty. About facing hard truths, even when they're uncomfortable." My stomach dropped. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. The room was dead silent now, everyone sensing the shift in atmosphere. "I recently did a DNA test," he announced. "Just out of curiosity, you know. These home kits are so easy now." My heart started hammering. Why was he talking about this? Why now? And the results were surprising. His eyes found mine across the room, and there was something cold in them I'd never seen before. "Maya, sweetheart, it turns out you're not my biological daughter." The words hit like a physical blow. The room erupted in shocked gasps, nervous laughter. Some people thought it was a joke, a terrible, tasteless joke. It had to be, but Dad wasn't laughing. "So I want you to know," he continued, his voice steady and cruel. "I forgot to put your name in my will. It didn't seem right, considering the circumstances." The room exploded in whispers. I sat frozen, my entire world shattering in real time. Every eye in that restaurant was on me, some pitying, some shocked, some uncomfortably amused. This was my humiliation, served up as entertainment at his birthday party. But something happened in that moment. Instead of breaking down, instead of crying or running away, something cold and absolutely resolute settled over me. I reached into my bag with steady hands, pulled out a single sheet of paper I'd been carrying for weeks, walked up to his table, and placed it in front of him. The room went completely silent, everyone watching. Then, without saying a single word, I ripped that paper into pieces. Right there in front of him. Right there in front of everyone. Dad's face drained of all color. His hands were shaking as he scrambled to piece the fragments back together, and when he finally managed it, when he finally read what I'd given him, he went absolutely white. I leaned in close, whispered 6 words only he could hear. "You were never William's son either." Then I walked out with my head held high, leaving him visibly trembling at that table, the room erupting in chaos behind me. To understand what happened at that party, you need to understand the lifetime of hurt that led up to it. You need to understand what it's like to spend 20 years trying to earn love from someone who was never going to give it. My mum, Catherine, died when I was 12. Car accident. One moment she was there, and the next she just wasn't. It destroyed us both, me and Dad. For a while we had each other. We were a team, grieving together, learning to navigate life without her. Those were actually some of my closest moments with him. Late nights talking about Mum, him holding me when I cried, promising we'd get through it together. Then he met Diane. 2 years after Mum died, Dad remarried. Diane brought her own baggage, a son from a previous relationship, and within a year, she and Dad had Jake together. And just like that, everything changed. I noticed it immediately. The way Dad's entire face would light up when Jake toddled into the room. The way my accomplishments were met with a distracted, "That's nice, sweetheart," while Jake's mediocre efforts got celebrated like he'd won a Nobel Prize. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, that grief had made Dad distant, and he just needed time to find his way back to me. So I worked harder, pushed myself to be better, smarter, more successful. Maybe then he'd notice. Maybe then he'd love me the way he loved Jake. I studied business at university, not because I wanted to, but because that's what Dad wanted. Joined his commercial real estate company straight after graduation, worked brutal 70-hour weeks, while Jake partied his way through a media studies degree that led absolutely nowhere. I built client relationships, closed major deals, essentially kept the entire company thriving while Dad took all the credit. And I never complained, because this was my way of proving my worth. This was how I earned my place in the family. There were moments of warmth between us, glimpses of the Dad I remembered from childhood, before Diane, before Jake. He'd occasionally put his hand on my shoulder after a successful deal and say, "Well done." And I'd cling to those moments like lifelines, convince myself that I was still his daughter, still valued, still loved. But there were other moments too. Comments that felt like paper cuts, small but constant. "You're so much like your mother, always so emotional. Jake has a natural business instinct. You just work hard. Better keep me happy, or you're out of the will." He'd laugh when he said it, like it was a joke, and everyone would laugh with him, including me. I never imagined he was planting seeds for something far more sinister. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't learn until much later, was that Diane had been poisoning him against me for years. Subtle comments here and there planting doubt, questioning why I didn't look more like him, suggesting that maybe, just maybe, Mom had been unfaithful, that maybe I wasn't actually his. Instead of confronting these doubts, instead of having an honest conversation when Mom was alive or even after she died, Dad let that poison fester for decades. Let it eat away at whatever love he had for me, until I became the enemy in his own narrative. The DNA test was Diane's idea, done 6 months before that party, using some dodgy online service that promised results in days. When it came back saying I wasn't his biological daughter, he didn't question it, didn't get a second opinion, didn't consider that the test might be wrong. He just accepted it, because part of him wanted it to be true. Part of him wanted an excuse for why he'd failed me as a father. And then he sat on those results for 6 months. 6 months of planning that public humiliation while I continued working 70-hour weeks, building his empire, trying desperately to be enough. The cruelest part, I would have understood if he'd come to me privately. If he'd said, "Maya, I have these doubts and I need answers." We could have worked through it together. But that's not what he did. He weaponized his doubt, turned it into a public execution, made my humiliation the centerpiece of his birthday celebration. And that's when he made his fatal mistake. Because he'd forgotten one crucial thing. I was Catherine's daughter. And Catherine was brilliant, fierce, and absolutely ruthless when backed into a corner. He was about to learn exactly where I got that from. The paper I ripped up at that party, the one that made Dad go pale as death, wasn't just any document. It was a letter, a confession, and it came from the one person whose opinion Dad had spent his entire life seeking, his own father, my grandfather William. Let me take you back 1 month before the party. I'd gotten a call from the care home where William lived. He wanted to see me, urgently. That wasn't unusual. I visited him regularly, more than Dad ever did actually. But something in the nurse's voice told me this was different. When I arrived, William was lucid, properly lucid, more present than I'd seen him in months. The fog of dementia had lifted, and his eyes were sharp and clear. "Sit down, Maya," he said, patting the chair beside his bed. "There's something you need to know, something I should have told you years ago." He handed me an envelope, yellowed with age, my name written on the front in his shaky handwriting. "I heard about Robert's DNA test," he said, his voice bitter. "Heard he's planning to humiliate you at his birthday party. That pompous fool. He has no idea what he's about to unleash." I opened the letter, and as I read, my entire understanding of my family shifted. It was a confession. Written 2 years earlier, witnessed and notarized, completely legal and binding. In it, William detailed something he'd kept secret for over 40 years. Robert wasn't his biological son. William's wife, Dad's mother, had an affair early in their marriage. Got pregnant. They'd agreed to raise the child as their own, to never speak of it, to let Robert grow up believing William was his biological father. William only discovered the truth when Robert was 20 through a medical situation that required blood typing. The numbers didn't add up. Confronted, his wife confessed everything. She'd been in love with someone else, had one night of weakness, and Robert was the result. William had kept that secret all these years. Decided the truth would cause more harm than good. Let Robert live his life believing in his legitimacy, in his place as the heir to the family name. But when William heard about Dad's DNA test, heard about his plan to publicly disown me based on false results, something in him snapped. That boy has no right to judge anyone for paternity, William told me that day in the care home, his voice shaking with anger. His whole life is built on the same lie he's trying to use against you. The hypocrisy makes me sick. The letter contained everything. Dates, hospital records, the name of Robert's biological father, a man who died years ago, never knowing he had a son. William had kept meticulous documentation all these years, never intending to use it, but never able to throw it away either. I want you to have this, William said, gripping my hand with surprising strength. Use it if you need to. Protect yourself. That boy of mine has become cruel, and I won't let him destroy you the way his insecurity has destroyed so many relationships in his life. But that wasn't all the letter contained. William had updated his will 6 months earlier. Left his entire estate to me, bypassing Robert entirely. The house Robert grew up in, the family heirlooms, the investment portfolio, everything. And he'd explicitly stated why. Maya is the only one who showed me genuine love without expecting anything in return. Who visited not out of obligation, but because she wanted to. Who asked about my stories, my life, who made me feel like I mattered. Robert visits twice a year, stays for 20 minutes, and spends the entire time checking his phone. Maya is the grandchild I wish I'd had from birth. She deserves to know she's valued. I sat there in that care homeroom, holding this letter, understanding the atomic bomb I'd just been handed. Robert had no idea this existed. He thought he was inheriting everything from William. Thought his father's estate, substantial but not enormous, would be his safety net in retirement. I spent the next month processing what I'd learned, trying to decide what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to confront Dad privately, show him the letter, make him understand that we were the same, both raised by men who weren't our biological fathers, both loved despite the lack of blood connection. Or at least I'd been loved. William had chosen to love Robert. Dad was choosing not to love me. I actually considered not going to the party at all. Considered just walking away, starting fresh, leaving the whole toxic mess behind. But something made me bring a copy of that letter. Call it intuition. Call it hope, the foolish, desperate hope that maybe Dad would surprise me. That maybe, when push came to shove, he'd choose love over cruelty. He didn't. When he stood up at that party and publicly humiliated me, when he announced he'd cut me from his will with that satisfied look on his face, I knew exactly what I had to do. I gave him the same gift he tried to give me, the destruction of identity. The revelation that everything he'd built his sense of self on was a lie. The paper I ripped up was a copy. The original was safely with my solicitor, along with William's updated will. But that copy was enough. Enough for Dad to understand that his entire foundation was cracked. That he had no right to judge my legitimacy when his own was just as questionable. And enough for him to realize that everything he'd expected to inherit was already gone. The party dissolved into absolute chaos after I left. I didn't see it personally. I was already in the car park, hands shaking as I unlocked my car, but I heard about it later from multiple sources. Apparently, it was spectacular. Robert sat at the head table, hands trembling as he held the pieces of William's letter, his face the color of ash. People were rushing over, asking what was wrong, what had just happened. Diane was trying to do damage control, her voice shrill as she insisted it was all a misunderstanding, that I'd always been dramatic, that everyone should please just sit back down and enjoy the party. But people were already leaving. grabbing coats, making excuses, desperate to escape the toxic family drama they just witnessed. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was a car crash, and nobody wanted to be associated with the wreckage. Jake stood there confused, his eyes darting between Robert and Diane. He'd known about the DNA test results. Diane had told him weeks ago, swearing him to secrecy, spinning some story about protecting the family. But he hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected his sister to have a nuclear option of her own. Some of Dad's business associates exchanged loaded glances. They'd worked with me, seen me close deals, knew I was the backbone of that company. This public humiliation didn't sit right with them, and their expressions said they were reassessing their relationship with Robert in real time. One of them, Marcus, a major commercial developer Dad had been courting for years, actually followed me out to the car park. "Maya," he called out, jogging to catch up with me. "Wait!" I turned, probably looking like an absolute mess, and he handed me his business card. "Whatever you need," he said, his voice firm. "Wherever you land, you call me. You're the best in the business, and what happened in there was disgusting. If you're striking out on your own, I want to work with you." I took the card, too numb to fully process what he was offering, and nodded. He squeezed my shoulder once, then headed back inside. I drove home in a complete daze, parked in my driveway and just sat there for an hour, engine off, staring at nothing. My phone started blowing up. Messages from family members demanding explanations, from friends who'd been at the party asking if I was okay, from Diane calling me selfish and vindictive. Nothing from Robert. Eventually, I dragged myself inside, made tea I didn't drink, and opened my laptop. If Dad wanted to cut me from his will, fine. But I was cutting him from my life in every way that mattered. I drafted my resignation from the family company, effective immediately. No 2 weeks' notice, no transition period, no professional courtesy. Just done. Then I did something calculated and brutal. I attached a detailed file containing every major deal I'd closed in the past 5 years. Every client relationship I'd personally built and maintained. All the intellectual property that lived in my head rather than in company files. Contact information for every contractor, every supplier, every connection that made the business run smoothly. I sent it to myself and to Robert's business partner, a man who'd always treated me with respect, with a note. "Consider this my formal resignation. All relevant client relationships and ongoing projects are detailed in the attachment. Most clients will likely follow me wherever I go. Best of luck." I hit send at 11:47 p.m. By midnight, my phone was ringing nonstop. Robert's business partner was in full panic mode, leaving voicemails begging me to reconsider, offering raises, promotions, anything to keep me. Robert was calling too, but I didn't answer. Let him sweat. Then Diane got through, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Maya, darling, let's not be hasty. Your father didn't mean it the way it sounded. Come by tomorrow and we'll sort this all out like family." "Tell Robert he's not my father," I interrupted, my voice ice cold. "And tell him he has 48 hours before I file a formal complaint about workplace harassment and discrimination. Every email, every comment, every time he's taken credit for my work, I have documentation. 48 hours to make this right, or I burn it all down." I hung up before she could respond. The war had officially begun. I woke up the next morning with absolute clarity. The devastation from the party had crystallized overnight into something sharp and purposeful. I wasn't running away. I was taking what was mine and building something better. Something he could never touch. First call, Marcus, the developer who'd given me his card. "I'm starting my own firm," I told him. "Commercial real estate, boutique operation, focused on the clients who actually matter. Are you in?" "Absolutely," he said without hesitation. "What do you need?" Within a week, I had financial backing. Marcus connected me with investors who'd been watching me carry Robert's company for years. They jumped at the chance to work with me directly, without Dad taking credit and skimming profits. 3 of Robert's biggest clients jumped ship immediately. They'd been working with me, not the company name. They trusted me completely, and when I explained I was going independent, they didn't even hesitate. Robert's firm started hemorrhaging money within days. He tried to fight back, of course. Hired solicitors, claimed I'd violated a non-compete clause, threatened legal action for stealing clients and proprietary information. My solicitor, the absolute best in the city, paid for with a portion of William's inheritance, demolished every argument. The non-compete was void because I was family, not a standard employee, and the contract had never been properly formalized. Dad had been so confident in his control over me that he'd never bothered with the legal paperwork. And given Robert's very public declaration that I wasn't his daughter, he couldn't now claim family business protections. His own words at that party became evidence against him. The legal route crumbled before it even properly started. Then I played my trump card with the DNA situation. I got my own test done. Proper one this time, through a reputable medical laboratory that specialized in paternity testing. Paid extra for the comprehensive analysis, the kind that couldn't be disputed in court. The results came back within a week, and they were stunning. Robert was my biological father. 100% certainty. The test he'd used was from some dodgy online company with a history of contaminated samples and misidentified results. Either his sample had been corrupted, or they'd sent him someone else's results by mistake. It happened more often than people realized with those cheap home kits. I had proof now. Certified, legal, indisputable proof that everything he'd said at that party was wrong. But I didn't immediately tell him. Oh no! I was far more strategic than that. I leaked the information carefully. First to my aunt, Mum's sister, who defended me after the party. Then to a couple of cousins who'd reached out with support. Let it spread naturally through the family gossip network, each person adding their own outrage, their own spin. By the time the information reached Robert, he was hearing it third-hand from people who were furious with him. And when he tried to deny it, when he insisted his test was accurate and mine must be wrong, nobody believed him. He burned too many bridges, lost too much credibility. Meanwhile, I was systematically building everything he'd failed to maintain. I joined business boards, sponsored local charities, made strategic donations to causes that mattered in our community, built my reputation independent of the family name. Everything Robert had, I was either taking or rendering irrelevant. His company, his reputation, his standing in the business community, all eroding while I rose. But I wasn't just destroying his professional life. I went after the personal connections too. I reached out to Catherine's family, Mum's sister and cousins, people I'd lost touch with after she died because Robert had systematically discouraged the relationship. He'd always had excuses. They were too emotional, too dramatic. They'd upset me with constant reminders of Mum. Now I understood what he'd really been doing, isolating me from people who actually loved me, who might have questioned his treatment of me. They welcomed me back with open arms. Shared stories about Mum I'd never heard. How strong she was, how she'd stood up to Robert when he tried to control her, how she'd been planning to leave him before the accident happened. That hit me like a truck. All these years, I'd thought they had a perfect marriage. Turned out, Mum had been just as trapped as I was. The patterns were suddenly crystal clear. Robert isolated the women in his life, cut them off from support systems, made them dependent on his approval. He'd done it to Mum. He'd done it to me. And I bet money he was doing it to Diane too, though she was too wrapped up in status and money to notice. The most devastating move came when I formally contested William's will. Robert had assumed he'd inherit everything. But William's letter explicitly stated Robert wasn't his biological son and left everything to me instead. The estate should legally be mine. Robert fought it, of course. Hired expensive lawyers, argued that William wasn't in his right mind, that I'd manipulated a sick old man. But the letter was legal, witnessed, properly documented, and William's solicitor testified that William had been completely lucid when he'd updated the will, had insisted on multiple witnesses specifically to prevent Robert from contesting it. The court case became public. Local papers picked it up. Every family secret got aired in legal documents that anyone could access. And the clincher? I revealed Robert's own words from the birthday party. Dozens of witnesses confirmed he'd publicly stated I wasn't his daughter, that he'd cut me from his will because of it. His own cruelty became the evidence that destroyed him. 6 months after the birthday party, Robert was in complete free fall. His company was bleeding money. 3 major clients gone, another 5 threatening to leave unless he could guarantee the same level of service I'd provided. He'd hired replacements, but they couldn't fill the gap. Nobody knew the relationships like I did. Nobody had spent years building the trust I'd cultivated. His marriage to Diane was fracturing. She'd signed up to be wife of a successful businessman, not nursemaid to a man spiraling into depression and alcoholism. She blamed him for the mess, for mishandling everything, for being stupid enough to humiliate me publicly without considering the consequences. Jake started asking uncomfortable questions. About family, about loyalty, about what it meant to be a father. He'd always looked up to Robert, but now he was seeing cracks in the foundation, wondering if he'd been valued for who he was or just for not being me. Robert made desperate attempts to contact me. Emails that went straight to spam. Calls I blocked. He even showed up at my new office once, disheveled and shaking, begging security to let him see me. I had security escort him out, watched from my window as they walked him to his car, and felt absolutely nothing. The community had sided with me. The story had spread, embellished and dramatized, the way these things always do, but the core remained true. Father publicly humiliates daughter with false DNA test, cuts her from will, then discovers she actually is his biological child after all. It wasn't a good look. Business contacts started avoiding him. Invitations to charity galas and networking events dried up. He became persona non grata in circles where he'd once been respected. Robert started drinking heavily. Single malt whiskey that Catherine used to buy him for birthdays, sitting alone in his home office until 3 a.m. He had a minor breakdown at a business dinner, ranting about ungrateful children and twisted family loyalty until his colleagues made excuses and left. His reputation, built over 30 years, crumbled in 6 months. Then came the final blow. William's estate officially transferred to me. The house Robert grew up in, the one he planned to retire to. The family heirlooms that should have been his birthright. The investment portfolio that would have set him up comfortably for the rest of his life. All mine. Legally and irrevocably mine. The will was ironclad. Robert's lawyers couldn't find a single angle to challenge it. William had been thorough, had anticipated every possible objection, had built something that couldn't be broken. Robert was left with nothing from his father except that letter, the one that basically said, "You were never really mine anyway." The same rejection he'd inflicted on me, coming full circle. Karma in its purest form. In desperation, Robert did something I hadn't expected. He wrote me a letter, an actual handwritten letter on proper stationery, delivered to my office by courier. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was raw, honest in a way Robert had never been before. He confessed everything. How Diane had poisoned him with doubts about my paternity for years, whispering suspicions until they became certainties in his mind. How he'd felt threatened by my competence, terrified that I'd outshine him in his own company. How losing Catherine had broken something in him that never properly healed. He admitted he'd projected all his inadequacy and pain onto me, made me the scapegoat for every failure in his life. The letter was pathetic, really, begging for just one meeting, one conversation, not expecting forgiveness, just needing me to know the truth. He'd included a new will, one where I was the primary beneficiary, where he'd left me the company, everything he still had. "I know it means nothing now," he wrote in shaky handwriting. "I know you've built something better without me. But I need you to know that you deserve this all along. You were always enough. I was the one who wasn't." I read that letter 3 times. Felt nothing the first time, anger the second, and on the third reading, the tiniest crack of something that might have been grief. Not grief for Robert, but grief for the father I deserved and never had. I agreed to meet him, but on my terms. I chose the cafe, quiet, neutral, on the opposite side of town from anywhere we'd ever been together. Daytime meeting, 1 hour maximum. I brought my solicitor, who sat at a nearby table with her laptop, a silent witness to whatever was about to unfold. Robert arrived 15 minutes early. I watched him through the window, sitting at our agreed-upon table, hands wrapped around a coffee cup he wasn't drinking. He looked like he'd aged 10 years and 6 months. The confidence was gone, replaced by something hollow and desperate. I walked in exactly on time. Sat down across from him without preamble. "You have 60 minutes to say whatever you need to say," I told him. "Then I'm leaving and this ends, one way or another." He started talking. Admitted everything from the letter and more. The jealousy, he'd felt when I started succeeding in the business. The inadequacy that gnawed at him every time I closed a deal he couldn't. The way William's success had always cast this long shadow over his own life, making him feel like he'd never measure up. "When Jake was born," he said, his voice cracking, "I saw it as a fresh start, a chance to be the father I'd failed to be with you. But instead of including you in that new beginning, I excluded you. Made you the before child from my painful past, while Jake was the after child representing hope." He admitted that my competence terrified him, that watching me become everything he'd never been triggered wounds he'd been nursing his whole life. "I sabotaged you," he said, tears streaming down his face now. "I sabotaged my own daughter because you were becoming everything I couldn't be. And when that DNA test came back, even though I know now it was wrong, part of me almost wanted it to be true. Because then I'd have an excuse for why I felt so disconnected from you." He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "It was never about biology, Maya. It was about my failure to be the father you deserved. My failure to be the man I should have been." I listened to all of it without interrupting. Let him purge decades of inadequacy and regret. When he finally finished, the silence stretched between us for a long moment. "Do you know what the worst part was?" I finally said, my voice quiet but steady. "It wasn't the public humiliation. It wasn't even cutting me from the will. It was realizing that no matter what I did, how hard I worked, how much I sacrificed, it was never going to be enough for you. Because the problem wasn't me. It was you. And I wasted so much of my life trying to earn love from someone who wasn't capable of giving it." Robert tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. "I don't forgive you. I don't know if I ever will. But I'm letting go of the anger because carrying it is hurting me more than it's hurting you. I'm choosing to release the poison you've had in me for 20 years. I slid a folder across the table. Robert opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a contract, a buyout offer for his failing company for a fair price, not pennies on the dollar. He'd remain as a figurehead consultant for 2 years, keeping his dignity and a steady income. After that, full retirement. "This is a business decision," I said firmly, "not a reconciliation. You'll work for me now. You'll follow my lead. You'll do the grunt work and keep your head down. And maybe if you actually do the work to become a better person, we can build something civil over time." I leaned forward. "But the father-daughter relationship you destroyed? That's gone. You don't get that back. Ever." Robert stared at the contract, tears dropping onto the pages. "Why would you do this?" he whispered. "After everything I did to you?" I stood up, gathering my things. "Because unlike you, I don't need to destroy someone to feel powerful. And because maybe, somewhere in all that wreckage, there's a version of you worth salvaging. But that's your work to do, not mine." I walked out of that cafe and didn't look back. 1 year later, my life looks nothing like it did before that birthday party. And honestly, I've never been happier. My firm has become one of the most successful boutique commercial real estate agencies in the city. I built it on merit, respect, and genuine relationships. Everything Robert's company never was. My team is incredible, diverse, talented, and we actually like coming to work. Robert works there now, in a junior consulting role, doing the grunt work he once considered beneath him: site visits, client research, administrative tasks. He's quiet, humbled. Some days we almost feel like colleagues who respect each other. Other days, I catch him watching me with such profound regret it's almost painful. But I don't soften. He made his choices. Now he lives with the consequences. Jake reached out 6 months ago, wanting to rebuild our relationship separate from our parents' mess. I was cautious but open. We meet for coffee sometimes, and he's been surprisingly honest about his own struggles. He's in therapy, dealing with the realization that being the golden child messed him up in different ways. He was never valued for who he actually was, just for not being me, for representing Robert's fresh start. It's left him with his own abandonment issues and identity crisis. We're slowly building something real. Siblinghood on our terms, not defined by Robert's dysfunction. The extended family has rebuilt around a new center, one where I'm the person they turn to for wisdom, support, and holiday gatherings. I host celebrations at the house I inherited from William, filling it with warmth and laughter it probably never had when Robert was growing up there. Robert's invited, but as a guest, never as the head of a table. Diane divorced him 8 months after the party. Couldn't handle the loss of status. Couldn't bear being married to someone who wasn't powerful anymore. Robert lives alone now in a modest flat, drives a regular car, lives within his means rather than beyond them. At a recent family gathering, he approached me quietly. "I know I don't deserve your kindness," he said, "but I want you to know I'm trying. Therapy, self-reflection, actually doing the work. I'm trying to become someone who might deserve a second chance." "That's all anyone can do," I replied. Not warm, but not cold either. Just honest. I think about Mum sometimes. Wonder what she'd make of all this. And I decide she'd be proud. Proud that I stood up for myself. Proud that I built something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. Proud that I found a way to be powerful without being cruel. In my office, there's a framed photo, not of Robert, but of Catherine. Her smile bright and genuine, taken months before she died. And next to it, a picture of my team. My chosen family. The people who showed up when blood relatives failed. I've learned the most important lesson of all. Family isn't just what you're born into. It's what you build. It's who shows up for you when everything falls apart. It's who values you not for what you can do for them, but for who you are. And I've built something extraordinary. The DNA test Robert used to destroy me ended up freeing me instead. And that's the sweetest victory of all.